let's start off here. How can Jesus, who is the Word that became flesh from John 1:14, it says in John 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. How can the Word be with God, and how can the Word be God?
Yeah, so the first thing to observe, I think that needs to be observed, is that the language here in verse 1 and throughout the prologue requires understanding the Word as a person. Okay, this is indicated in the language pros ton theon when it says with God, right? That language is uniformly used for persons, right? Relating to each other. Just the phrase itself, pros ton theon, indicates pros is a directional term. It means toward, right? And so this is consistently used of persons. The only exception to this are the two examples in Hebrew, the book of Hebrews, where the exception is indicated by the fact that the phrase is preceded by the neuter article, ta pros ton theon. That's not what's going on here. John is using the normal construction, right? So there's no grammatical grounds for understanding this in anything other than the ordinary way, that this is referring to one person being with another. And by the way, what precedes pros ton theon here is the Greek word ein, right? So just like it says, in the beginning was the Word, and arche ein was the Word, it says kai theos, en arche ein halagos, kai halagos ein pros ton theon. So the Word was with God. So that's a stative verb, which means that the reason it's not translated toward there is not because it's not indicating that the Word is toward him, but because of the stative verb, it takes on the force of the word with, right? So you can't depersonalize the Word here. You don't speak of an abstract thing being with somebody, right? You get these groups that say this refers to God's plan. It refers to, God's rationale or something like this. You don't speak that way of a person's plan or a person's rationale. That's not what the phrase pros ton theon does in Greek, and that just isn't what's going on here. Moreover, this is further proven by the fact that in verse 2 it says, this one was in the beginning with God, hutos, right? It uses the masculine form of the demonstrative pronoun. Now, it is true that the demonstrative pronoun, which in this case is masculine, can sometimes be used of impersonal things. That's not how it's normally used, and you need some contextual reason for going in a different direction. But contextually, we already have pros ton theon, which indicates personhood, so it should be understood in its normal meaning. But what makes this even more definitive is that in verse 3, it says, all things became through him. Now it uses not the demonstrative pronoun, but the pronoun him, auton. And moreover, it says, all things became through him, di autou egeneta. So here you have the Greek word dia being used with a genitive, dia autou egeneta, and that always indicates agency. So in other words, it's saying that the Word was the agent of creation. Okay, so again, the force of the grammar, and this carries through the context, right? All the way through the context, you have this forceful language being used that necessitates understanding the Word as a person, right? Verse 10, it says he came into the world, he came unto his own, and his own did not receive him, right?
Right.
Or it says again, he was in the world.
The world
became,
yeah,
right, became through him. It's the same exact phrase, di autou egeneta,
right.
but his own did not receive him.
Right.
Right. And then it goes on to say, as many as received him, to them he gave the right to be called the children of God.
Yeah, you can't.
Those who believe in his.
You can't reject just a plan. You're rejecting a person.
Yeah, but notice it says to those who believe in his name.
Right.
Right. These he gave the right to be called the children of God.
Right.
So the Word is clearly a person.
Right.
All right. That's undeniable. And so when it says the Word was with God, it's talking about a person being with God.
And
right?
also, made note, which I think was one of my favorite videos of you so far, is your one on John 14:28. I've actually listened to it a few times now. I really have enjoyed it. And you brought up a good point, which proston patera is used throughout the Gospel of John, where he was sent by the Father, and he's going back to the Father, and even proston theon in John 13:3, he's going back to God, the same exact phrase. So he was with the Father, he was with God in the beginning, before anything ever was, before creation, he's before all things. And then as Jesus is climaxing towards the crucifixion, he's now talking to his disciples, saying, I'm going back to God. I'm going to be going back to the Father where I was before. I'm going to be glorified. Father, glorify me with the glory which I had with you before the world was, John 75. So just the consistency of what John has written, just the clear consistency that Jesus, the Son, was with God, the Father, per se, prior to all things.
And by the way, since you're talking about John's consistency, the literal Greek at 17:5 says, Father, glorify me. And by the way, that's an imperative. Jesus is issuing an imperative to the Father. Every Unitarian should take note, right? He's imperatively telling the Father, do this, right? Which Jesus, where does he get off telling the Father? It's assumed that the Father can command the Son, but, if Jesus is God, why can't he do the same sort of thing? That's what often is asked. But here's Jesus issuing an imperative, Father, glorify me. And then it says, glorify me with the glory which I had with you before the world became.
Right.
It's the same Greek word. It's the same contrast.
Right.
He had glory with the Father before the world became.
That goes right back to John 1.
Right.
Yeah.
And that shows, again, the importance of the prologue. The prologue is functioning as a window through which you're to look at the narrative. It's telling you what to anticipate. It's also telling you how to view it, how to understand it. That's what, it's sort of like, think of trying to read the book of Job. I often get questions from people when it comes to Job, and I'm thinking, did you not read the first 2 chapters? Right? That's Job's problem, right? Job's here with his 3 friends, and they're all sitting around, speculating, philosophizing on what's going on here. Right. The whole point is we have the prologue. We know why this is all happening.
Exactly right.
Right. Job and his 3 friends don't. And, he gets some perspective at the end of the book. But Unitarians and other groups jump into John's gospel and then they try to interpret it in fanciful ways. If they had just entered through the front door, they would already have the tools to interpret these things.
Enter through the front door. I love it.
They're trying to climb up some other way, right? Like thieves and robbers, right? Enter through the door.
So that's obviously how Jesus was with God in the beginning. He was proston theon. He was face to face. He was with him in personal relationship from eternity past. But yet here comes the stumbling block for people who are like other groups, whether they're Unitarians or Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, they will sometimes translate it as a God or things like that. But yet it literally says here, the Word was God, right? But yet this again shows how Christ is by nature from eternity God, but not the Father, as already been pointed out. And again, this goes back to verse 3 that you were talking about before. It doesn't say all other things or some things came into being. It says all things came into being or began, as you like to say, by him, and apart from him, nothing came to be without him. So he can't be a part of creation. He didn't create himself. And as again, like Colossians 1, Hebrews 1, and other places, he is before all things. He before everything. So when we're talking in the beginning, this is like Jesus was with the Father from the very beginning, but he is also recognized as being God. Why? Because he is also the very one who created all things.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the Greek here, where, these different groups try to smuggle in, their error. There is a distinction in the Greek. It's not the one that they think it is. You get the Jehovah's Witness rendering where it says the word was a God, right? And then the argument comes in, well, because when it's referring to the Father, it's articular, right? It says the word was with Theos. Well, literally, it's in the accusative, which basically means in Greek is an inflected language, so words change their form depending on how they're functioning in the sentence. So in English, we don't have some of these things, but if something's the subject, it would have one form. If it's the object of the sentence, it would have a different form. Well, in the second clause, when it says the word was with God, it says proston theon. So that's the Greek word theos, but the accusative form, right? And it uses the article ton theon. So it's articular, and if you want to translate it literally, it would be the word was with the God, right? However, when you come to the next verse, it doesn't use the article with theos for the word. Now, here the word theos is not being used as the object of the sentence, so it's used as a predicate nominative, is what they say technically, and so it has a nominative form, right? So it's theos, the normal form, right? It says kai theos ein halagos. Kai is the word for and, so it doesn't have ha theos or ton theon, right?
Right.
So what they're saying is, okay, so it's saying the word was with the God, but it doesn't say the word was the God. So the word must be something less than that, right? But a lot of mistakes here, right? But just notice so first of all, the word God just means God, right? It doesn't mean something less than that or what have you. It means God, right? You could have the word being used in for idols, for example, where it's understood that these are false gods, but it still means the word God, right? Right. Satan's called the God of this world, right? To the unbeliever, he is. They stand in relation to him, or in their thinking, he is to them God, right? They're following him, they're serving him, they're submitting him. That he is in the place of God for them. The word means God, even though we recognize Satan's not the true God, right? Well, here John is affirming Jesus is God, right? He's making an affirmative statement. It's a true declaration, but it doesn't mean anything less than God. But the significance of this construction is that it's not that he's saying something less about the word than that he said about the Father. It's that he's drawing a distinction between the word and the Father, right? The distinction is not essential, it's personal. Right. So in other words, and I'll kind of drop some of the highfalutin language here. In other words, the word was with God, meaning the Father, and the word was God by nature, right? That's how any competent Greek grammarian will tell you this verse. That's what it means, right? It's saying that the word is by nature what theos is, right? What the God is. So in fact, the meaning is that he is essentially what, because it's qualitative. That's the upshot here. It's qualitative, and it means he is by nature what the Father is. That's where you get the notion of one essence, right? The Greek fathers who came up with the phrase homoousios, they knew Greek. They weren't dummies, right? That's the point of this construction in Greek. It's saying he is essentially what the Father is.
Right.
So the distinction rules out modalism.
Yep.
Right? Because it's not saying Jesus is the Father, and it at the same time rules out Arianism, which is the idea that the Son is something less than what the Father is.
Right.
He is everything that the Father is, but he's not the Father.